Hello, welcome back to all the listeners. It's been some time that we had a conversation around the fraud technology itself. Today, with us, we have a renowned expert in the telecommunication space, Dave Erickson. He's the founder of Phound, a very interesting company. I will let Dave explain more about what he's doing, but it's a great pleasure to have somebody like him to start back after about a month and a half of a gap from the Fraud Technology podcast itself. Welcome, Dave, to our Fraud Technology podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it's such a nice thing to see somebody like you with so much experience in this particular space. Dave, maybe you could quickly introduce what you do and what's your background. I know you've done a lot of work in the telecommunication space. Would love to know a little bit about how you started your career and then where you are at this point of time.
Yeah, so my foray, if you will, into telecom was freeconferencecall.com, which became, had viral marketing behind it and became, at one point in time, the largest audio conferencing company in the world, based on minute volume. And when something like that happens, it's it's very fun, but you have to solve all these issues, and you solve these issues by becoming adept at making software, building networks. And we ended up with 3 different carriers: a wireless carrier, a VoIP carrier, a CLIC, and a worldwide network where we operated in 70 different countries from that experience. And so it was a really a great start into telecom, and has definitely put me at a different level.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, and when you started this, what was this time period around? I mean, is it? I remember it was 2013 or 14, right?
Yeah, I started Free Conference Call in October of 2001.
Oh, wow.
And before that, I had been working on video and video switching and stuff like that, and really wanted to get into the telecom side.
Wonderful. And how did that experience of founding that company lead into founding Phound itself? What's your inspiration of founding? Again, the word founding and the company name founding is a little confusing here. The company name, what Dave founded, is Phound. It's spelled as Phound. So it sounds similar, but don't get confused for the listeners itself. So what's your inspiration for creating Phound itself?
Well, so Phound, I believe, fixes a couple things. I'm a believer in our public switch telephone network. Our voice network is actually obsolete to the point of it's broken, right? And our SMS follows close behind that, except that SMS has a situation where it's self-regulated versus having FCC regulation. But those 2 networks are broken because they were made to be accessible, and the whole schematics for the public switch telephone network was over 100 years ago. And it's just no match for today's computers, robocallers, AI, deepfakes, all that kind of stuff. The network has absolutely no protection at all. It's wide open. It's made for accessibility.
What do you mean by made for accessibility? I mean, maybe let me talk about what I understand from what you're saying, and probably can explain further. So when you say made for accessibility, it was always designed for end-to-end connections with no sort of a control in the middle, except for facilitating and routing those connections. There is no control mechanism in the middle itself. So anybody from this part of the network can talk to anybody in the network. So is that what you mean by made for accessibility?
Yeah, the idea, when you get a phone number, you think, oh, hey, I got a phone number, now everybody can call me.
Okay.
Right? Like, that's why you get a phone number, is so that you can be contacted. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of selection as to how you can stop people from calling you if you don't want them to call you. And then you're working with a network that has kind of been transformed from a circuit switch network to a VoIP network, and when it became digitized in VoIP, things like caller ID are easily spoofable, right? It doesn't It doesn't take much to create a VoIP phone and originate calls and put whatever phone number in you want. And so, although it's like my favorite network and I love the telephone addressing system more than any other addressing system, it's just built without any of this kind of fraud in mind. And so it doesn't have the hooks to build in the protections even. You know, when we were doing conference calling, people would say, you know, someone joined my conference call. And it's like, well, that's the idea. We're trying to make it very easy to join. And they said, yeah, but, you know, how did they get my password? And I said, well, first of all, it's not a password, it's an access code. It's the opposite of a password, right? It's for entry, right? Like, and if it gets shared, right, that's the idea behind it. That's the level that technology is at. It doesn't have, you know, it takes a lot to then start building in protections because those protections aren't real convenient. And so that was kind of what inspired us with Phound, was to kind of go after that idea that phone is just accessible because you have a number and there's no self-managed gateway in the middle.
Okay. And how does Phound achieve some sort of control or provide a gateway for, I'm assuming this is providing some kind of a gateway to the end user, not to the telecom company itself.
Correct. And so the first thing that puts Phound different than like our Endeavor with free conference call is that Phound is on the carrier level. So it's getting the calls and the SMSs before it's making it to the handset, right? Or, you know, the endpoint. And so Phound is actually in the carrier flow. So that's one of the key things. And what we're doing at Phound is we're taking, picture it like this, it's a visual space with a telephone number address. So if you put in the telephone number, you can see this visual space at Phound, right? That visual space is a contact, but it's a self-managed contact. It's my contact. I put up the picture, I put up the information, I can put up a bio, I can link my social media. I can do all these very nice things at this visual space. And along with that, because we're a carrier, it has all of the different ways to connect to me, make calls, chat, join a meeting, and these kind of things. That visual space is controlled by me in the phone number world. And so you have to have a phone number to come view my visual space. With that phone number, I can like search through my contacts, blacklists, whitelists, you know, employee lists, all kinds of different things to say, hey, you know what, that person can only view this much, or they can see these things that other people can. They can make calls, they can't make calls, they can join meetings, they can't join meetings. And so when someone from the general public, let's say, comes and views your visual space, your contact card, your Phound space, by entering, say, your phone number, that's all they have. They might get a picture of you, right? Maybe that's what you decided to put up. And then they would say, oh, hey, I want to talk to you. And it would send you a message, and it would say, hey, this guy found you, right? PH. He found you, and, you know, what do you want to do? You know, do you want to grant him access? Do you want to allow him to put your contact in his book? Right? Do you want to put his contact in your book? And do you want to customize his level of controls with you going forward? And so it's a very nice way to like sort of vet everybody. Like you can vet people on Facebook or Instagram by, you know, like you've got to friend me, right? And I got to say, oh, okay, yeah, I like you. I'll let you follow me. Same thing with the contact, right? It's a very nice way to stop all the spam, all the calls, everything.
Okay, so if I have a connection with, let's say, Verizon, your system sits within Verizon premises, and they provide a mobile app to me to choose my customizations, or how do I set up my own customizations as a user?
Oh yeah, so you just go to Phound. You could go to the Phound.app website and just log in, right? Every phone number has a space.
Correct.
Right? So you need to claim your space. You're going to claim your space simply through authentication. We're going to send your phone number a code, or we're going to call you with a code, and you're going to have to put that code in at the web in order to get access to your space. And then once you get access to your space, you can put up whatever pictures you want. You control what they see, when they see, who sees, who can call, and you just kind of you start building your space out. There's a lot you can do there. So it works for free, what we call over the top, and that's the idea that your phone number belongs to your phone, and we're kind of creating a secondary environment to that phone number. And then there's Phound numbers, which cost $5 a piece, and those are phone numbers that come from our carrier and that are connected to the same visual space, and they are completely protected. They are completely locked down. Like they eliminate the fraud and the spam. They eliminate it. It's not like you get a story of how they stopped it. It's just gone.
Okay. And Phound has connections with all the telecom carriers.
Phound works through a company that's in the Carrier X portfolio, and it's called HD Carrier, and I believe it's the first HD carrier. It's got the 3 major carriers in the United States in zero hop direct connects, and so it's basically off the PSTN, and it's in HD, so it's high definition, and so it's much better for AI character engines and calls like this where we're trying to make a really good recording, things of that nature. And so with that phone company, then we're able to kind of complete the chain and fix both the PSTN and the contact world.
Okay. So now I want to come back to a little bit on the fraud side itself again, robocalling and different types of marketing tactics to reach the customer and communicate what they're trying to communicate. Doesn't necessarily always lead into fraud itself. It can be a pure marketing stunt itself to make you buy something, right? So how does Phound stop fraud itself?
Yeah, so we get in the path of the call at the carrier level. And so what we're doing is we're giving you this Phound space, and when you go there and you say, hey, I only want people in my contacts to be able to call me. When a call comes into the carrier, at that level, we check that call to your contacts. And if that caller is not in your contacts, then we tell that caller, this caller uses Phound to protect their phone number. Go to Phound.app, right? And ask this caller for permission to call.
Okay.
And that's it. And so if you're a fraudster, you're done at that point, right? Because,
you can't even call them.
What are you going to do?
Okay. Do you also do aggregation of data across different players? Because one caller may be targeting multiple people, and on Phound, you may be...
Oh, yeah. So we have like honeypot technologies where we're collecting numbers from industry groups of people that are sensing, robocalls, and they quickly mark these numbers, and then you can check against those numbers at the same way at the carrier level. And then you can decide whether you want to pass them through if the person's, allowing for them to be passed through, spam likely, that kind of thing. So we're collecting data in that way. We also look at our network, and we're looking for people that are doing odd calling patterns, right? So we're really looking for your, big ball in the center, vanilla ice cream kind of user, right? It's just, hey, I make this many calls a day. It's to my mom. It's to I'm doing business. These are very, very easy to spot common patterns. And if you see someone that's, contacting numbers that they've never contacted before and, a large basis, it would be easy to nip that quickly.
Okay, understand. And does this Phound also protect the SMS network as well?
Yes, it does. Okay. Right? So it's in both paths.
Okay. And let's assume that, let's say, my Uber driver is downstairs and he's calling me to find out where I am, because that's a random number and I don't even know that that's the number that I'm getting, versus a fraudster trying to call me, right? How would the Phound system differentiate between these two?
So those kind of things you have to figure out when you're setting up your line, how tight you want to lock it down. The people that want to lock it down the tightest are, typically like seniors, or it's because it's a business line. And I'm going to have it really, really screwed down. My personal line, I'm going to open up so that I can receive these calls, and like the spam likely type stuff I'll use. It has like whitelisting and blacklisting, and so people that I have issues with, I can eliminate that way. But you can put it in a mode where you can see these guys coming through, and whether or not you want to accept it.
Okay, understand. And for the SMS also, I'm assuming similar controls are available on Phound itself. Okay. So one thing that I want to understand a little bit more on the SMS itself, because the financial services does use SMS as a two-factor authentication. And it's by far the biggest, the most common two-factor authentication that banks or fintechs do across the globe, and it's just not the US itself, right? So I wanted to understand, because this is actually coming from a business, and sometimes the SMS is routed by many different, you may or may not be sure that's actually coming from a bank, right? So how would we be able to detect that this OTP that we are supposed to receive from a person that we don't know actually when we are receiving it? So is there like a whitelisting and blacklisting for business applications trying to send an SMS to you, vis-a-vis an individual sending an SMS to you?
Yeah, so when it's like SMS to SMS, there's going to be like areas, and I mean that's kind of what I'm saying. It is a broken system, right? You either have to open it or you have to close it, right? And if you open it, you're open to everything, and if you close it, it's locked down. And Phound, we have different levels of that, right? And so we're currently talking to some financial institutions in how to actually solve this. And what's beautiful about Phound is we're creating this visual space. We're saying the phone number's the address. Well, I can like tie my driver's license to that and get a blue check of verification. And when I'm talking to the bank, right, it can pass that information, and the bank knows if they're on Phound that they're talking to me, right? I also know if I'm talking to the bank on Phound that I'm talking to the bank, right? You can't like do a deep fake spoof on Phound, because we're not letting people get to those controls, right? And we're locking down the thing and verifying the IDs, and our blue checks aren't like, hey, we asked some good questions and this seems like this is the person. It's actually taken off of a government issued ID.
Okay, understand. And you also receive a lot of robocalls from outside US into US citizens, right? Which is carriers from across the globe, not just originating from the US itself. So how you are still able to track that as well? Because the numbers, when it's coming from outside the country, sometimes, and I'm assuming in your Phound system, you can create controls based on the numbers itself. But let's say I am calling from my normal line and I'm actually traveling somewhere to the US. Sometimes the numbers can be jumbled up itself, because it depends on how the network goes about. So is that sort of a protection that is available, or is it only purely US at the moment?
So the blocking of calls is going to block, international as well, right? The opening is going to, typically include international calls as well. I mean, one of the things that I do on my Phound account, so numbers are $5 a month. Right? So to have 3 numbers is $15, right? It's not like it's a big thing. You get US calling with all 3 of those numbers, everything. I take 1 number, it's what I use for my open table, my Uber, all this stuff. And so when I'm doing something that's that, like, and if that number's happening, I know that, like, hey, that's probably because I'm waiting on an Uber right now, or because I'm about ready to go into a restaurant. So it's kind of like a public use number. My personal number, I've taken that and my business numbers, and I've locked them down to like the contacts that I have and whitelist, and then I allow for permissions. And so typically when I'm meeting someone, I'll tell them, hey, go use the Phound app. They'll use it. They'll like, or I have to put their contact in so that they can make contact.
Okay. Okay. Would I also love to know any specific instances of how Phound was able to stop some of the ongoing fraud? Do you have any statistics around for actual use cases that you have seen when people use Phound?
Well, when Phound's doing what Phound does, it eliminates, the fraud, and so it also eliminates the stories. We don't know what almost happened, right? You just chopped it off, and it's not there. But I've seen all kinds of fraud, and like putting these phone systems together, we see fraudsters come on and try and fraud and try and use things to do different things. We see obviously a lot of robocall, number spoofing kind of things. We see like virtual PBXs or what they call a PBX, a personal branch exchange or private branch. They get hijacked, and they make an extension, and then they use different phone numbers to call out over that PBX's long distance plan, and they actually sell them as like wholesale trunks, where they'll sell like 200 calls at a time on this guy's PBX, stuff like that. And those are usually bad things they're doing, right? They're calling their publisher's clearinghouse. There's some scam where they can spoof a number, and people think that's the number that's calling, and it has the right caller ID and all that kind of stuff. And then on the SMS side, we see the situation where it's a numbers game, right? And it's hey, Bill, are we golfing today or not? And it's like you feel guilty for this guy because he sent it to the wrong person. So you say, oh, no, I'm not Bill. And then, they try and work from there. I think a lot of that's AI, and I think it's huge numbers. And I really think they're looking for our most vulnerable, and that's sad, right? And so I'm not like a vulnerable guy. I can stand to have a couple texts coming through on a number that I use for public use. I think, my mom and dad, when they were alive, they could be locked down tight and kept away from those guys and be much better off. They're not doing a whole lot of Ubering and open table and that kind of stuff, and we could give them a number specifically for doing that they don't, transact with people other than apps like that. Right?
Understand. So another thing that I would love to understand a little bit on is typically when we want to try to curtail fraud or basically spamming as well, is that it adds some sort of customer friction to how users can stop, right? There is a customer friction added to the experience itself, right? So how do you balance, because as you rightly said, you can put tight controls. That's the best way, no risk. But that also creates risk that some Uber guy is not trying to reach you. And sometimes when I set it up, I say, okay, I tightly control it, but realize a few days down the line that, hey, I was not actually getting some calls that I was supposed to get calls. And then I go back and I have to change it again, right? So I wanted to understand what is your thought process about the debate between the user friction, how much amount of friction that you want to do, versus the security and safety of the process itself. So how do you manage this in your Phound app itself?
Yeah, so I think the first level is how much of a pain in the side of the customer is it, right? Like I get on my wireless phone, I get all these calls coming through all day long. Like what extent do I go to, right? And I think it varies for different people dramatically. Yep. And so it's finding the people that it's like, hey, you know what, I actually need to do something here, right? Because I think the average person, that convenience factor, the extra keystrokes, the occasional missed call, they might say, well, it's not worth it to me or something, right? And I think the solution to that is having, more telephone numbers and using them, for different things. I believe that as time goes on, that group of people that want to stop is going to grow dramatically because the scams are going to get worse and the deep fakes are going to get worse, and it's not getting better. And we've done everything I think we can do regulatorily, imposing fines, and it's like they're having difficulties actually corralling, the problem, right? And so I think that's, the thing is that we've got to become a little smarter about what we're doing. And I think that customer education is very difficult. What Phound is doing is Phound is saying, hey, you know what, there's a better way to do this whole phone number thing, right? There's a better way to do contacts, right? And there's a better way to do communication, the actual connections. And the Phound stuff works, for the phone as good as it can and SMS, but when you get into meetings, it's doing the same thing in meetings, right? So it's a phone number centric system. And I have the ability to say, you can't join my meeting unless you're in my contacts. And if you're not in my contacts, well, then I'll negotiate with you and get you into the meeting if you need to be, right? I'll see the messaging. But otherwise, you're not getting into my meeting, right? I lock it down real quick, and I don't have to accept everybody and everything. It runs off my contacts, it runs off my whitelist, my blacklist, all those kinds of things. So I think it's super useful as you kind of span across all of the different channels of communication. You might look at it well, I want to leave my voice open, but I want to shut my SMS down. And my meetings, I want to lock to just my contacts, and so that's what we're looking to do, is give people the ability to say to what groups of people that might be contacting me, what things do I want to offer them, right? And so if I offer them chat, but I don't offer them calling, when they can't get through on the call, do they just chat and say, hey, Dave, it's Robbie. I need to talk to you, brother. Oh, okay, yeah, you know what? I'll call you, right? Or something like that. Okay. But it's interesting, right? Phound has set these triggers in to happen, and we'll be triggering the ability to call from document signatures, right? From monetary transactions, joining a certain club, certain parts of the ID, age, sex, residence. So there's a lot of ways to trigger whether somebody can talk to you or not. And so in the idea of prospecting and promoting, where you can promote a number and people can find a number, and then they can negotiate at what level they can get through to get services, get information, talk to a celebrity, whatever it might be. And so we think that over time, it's going to be one, a very good thing for access, and two, a very necessary thing for privacy and security.
Understand.
Because the problems are going to get worse. Yeah.
Okay, so I think so I originally come from India, and in India you get a lot of spam calls as well. So one of the apps that is used in India is something called a Truecaller. So it's an app that you install, or actually some of the telecom networks have already installed Truecaller. So the user can tell who the call is from, and it also gives you a spam or not. So how does the technology of Phound compare to something like a Truecaller?
Yeah, as I understand Truecaller, you kind of go and register your number, and then you make it kind of verified in a way, because you've gone and registered the number, and then they can create information, more accurate information on the called side about you and things of that nature. I think Phound, there's some overlap there. Obviously, Truecaller has some pretty good momentum, as you say, in India. Also, we see it in Europe, and I think they're looking at coming to the United States. So I think there's real value in their solution. I think that what we're looking at is we're going a little deeper. We're working on the carrier level, and we're providing also, proper communications. And so when you get Found, you get US calling, you get an SMS. So you're getting numbers that you can actually transact with, not just register. But there is like a register, there's a better know your caller, there's ID verification. And so we expect that these additional things above and beyond what Truecaller offers will be, also very nice in the future.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So I think Truecaller, if I remember correctly, again, I may not be very sure about this, is when they initially came in, when you install their app, they have access to your contacts. So by having access to, let's say, 10 million people with 100 contacts each, you have quite a significant chunk of contacts and their numbers, essentially. Now we can create a map of whether this number and this name maps or not. Because my number could be in 10 other people's contact. And if the name is similar, you can be sure that the identity has matched with that number itself. And they pick that identity and then show that identity. When a new person who has never interacted with Ravi, gets a call from me, can show that, hey, most likely it's Ravi calling. And you may not recognize who Ravi is, but it at least show you who it is. I mean, at least that's how I understood how Truecaller works before they started, because this was a pre-privacy, pre-GDPR times. So now I think they probably more legitimized because access to contact list is not easily available for apps as well. But most of them did collect data like that a long time ago, yeah. So one of the questions I had is around, one is the modus operandi of fraudsters to go to SMS or calling predominantly being the main source where they try to identify, especially elder fraud, focused on senior citizens, especially has been around phone calls, right? What we also see is quite a bit of modus operandi on the social media itself, because in countries like India or developing world, SMS is pretty much dead. It's only used for getting an OTP from a bank. I mean, apart from that, you don't use the SMS at all, right? So most of the MOs that I've seen through a message format are either through Telegram or WhatsApp or any of these texting mediums itself. So is that a direction that Phound also is looking at? Do you have plans to address WhatsApp related, for example, it's similar communication rights also, WhatsApp as well as Telegram and different social media where you can be receiving messages for investment and stuff like that? Is Phound working towards that direction?
Yeah, so we have a complete on-net chat, right? That's an international chat, and there's basically all of the over-the-top features that come in like a WhatsApp, but there's also like auto attendant, call routing. There's online meetings up to 1,000 people, and those communications are done in a much better way than like the public switch telephone network and SMS, right? So like on-net communications, like you would see in WhatsApp and Signal and all of that, is state of the art.
Wonderful. Okay, one final question from my side. How big is Phound now, and what's your plan for Phound in the next few years? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so Phound's got like a 5-year plan. The next couple of years, we're just looking to get users onto our network into the top of the funnel. I'm a big believer in conference calls and online meetings. Obviously, I founded freeconferencecall.com, and I saw what can be done there virally. Phound has the fastest online meeting there is, right? And it's very secure because it's using phone numbers. And so anything that happens in phone numbers, we're probably going to get more and more closer to, things like Truecaller and true caller IDs and things like, Phound's doing verifying IDs and stuff like that. And so I think that will make a big difference in that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dave, for spending the time with us, and good luck with whatever you're doing at Found. Have fun. Take care. Have a nice day.